Hi, I'm Dr. Gemma, and welcome back to Cognitive, the Knitting Psychology podcast. Cheerfully and somewhat irregularly in business since 2008. Segments today may include what's on my hooks, needles, and spindles, a strategy, something I really like, put a lid on it, oh shoot, and blather. So sit back, put your feet up, pick up your knitting, crocheting, spinning, weaving, or dyeing, or any other yarny thing you're doing, and get ready to enjoy. Well, hello there, it's Dr. Gemma, and this is episode 176 of Cognitive. Hello, happy Easter to those of you who celebrate. And I know there's a bunch of other spring festivals and equinox festivals happening in different faiths at this time of year. So happy, beautiful day of joy to all of you. I'm sorry I don't know the specifics. And of course, also it is a day to celebrate the equality, we hope, of our trans siblings as well. So hello to all of you if you're listening. I'm so pleased you're all here. It is a pouring rain Easter Sunday here, but it is Sunday, March 31st at 4:03 p.m. And of course, the year is 2024, if anybody's archiving this. And I'm just so glad to be with you. I've had a very restful weekend, just hanging out here, catching up on the fun. So, speaking of fun, your comments are always welcome. You can comment on the blog at cognitivepodcast.blogspot.com, and you can also comment on our group on Ravelry. And that leads me to say thanks to all of you who are commenting. I enjoy the comments a great deal. I usually sort of let them sit until Saturday evening or Sunday morning because I want to give everybody a chance to react to the latest episode, which usually posts around noon on Saturdays, my time here on the west coast of the U.S. Let's see. Speaking of which, in the warm thanks department, thank you to Amber W., who pointed me towards two lovely sweaters that include crocheted granny squares. I was really impressed by the Fleetwood sweater. By the way, both the patterns are from Tanis Fiber Arts, and Tanis is T as in Thomas, A, N as in Nancy, I, S as in Sam. The really exciting thing about the Fleetwood is that she uses crochet to make the front by putting together 9 granny squares in a big square. And then she picks up stitches with knitting and uses that to finish the sweater. And at least in her version of it, there's no gaps. It looks very smooth, very well joined. This is a fabulous idea. Now, I did download the sweater and have to look at it. My assumption is it has to be in pieces. That, you do a front, you do a back, you seam at the shoulders and up the sides, and then you're probably picking up stitches and knitting on the arms. That's what it looks like from the imagery. And this is a perfectly good way to make a sweater. And this also leaves you with a lot more room to fool around. Like I looked at it and I immediately thought, but you could also make a sort of adapted cross that would look like a column of 3 in the center, granny squares that is, crossed by a column of 3 at the center square of that. And then you could put 1 square at each corner of the cross you've made. In other words, it wouldn't be the full 9 squares. Anyway, you can experiment with this. That's what I'm saying, that the real contribution here is that Tanis Fiber Arts is showing us how to move from a crocheted centerpiece to a knitted body, and that allows for things like tapering and all sorts of good stuff in the knitting. Now you can taper and crochet too, but I'm saying if you want to knit primarily in a sweater, if that's the drape and the hand that you want, but yet you still love that granny square look. The other thing you can do here, she is using a very traditional granny square, which is the basic pattern is a cluster of 3 in the first stitch, and then a chain, and then you keep doing that. And in the next row above that, you have the chains above the clusters, and the clusters into the chain. and that's the traditional granny square. But there are a lot of ways you can make squares in crochet. You can use any stitch you want and just go around the corners with chains so that you change the direction of the stitches that follow. There's just a million of them, and if you go to Ravelry and if you go to Amazon, you're going to find a lot of books about different types of crocheted granny squares. So the Fleetwood sweater really offers a lot of opportunities for the craftsperson to experiment with all sorts of looks with granny square designs sunk into a very straightforward knitted sweater body. It's very smart, and I really like it just for that. You could learn a whole lot of techniques here. The other thing is, of course, normally we see people go from knitting to things like crocheted edges. You don't usually see someone move from crochet as the centerpiece to knitting as the surround. So my thanks to Amber W., because this is a really interesting, innovative pattern in and of itself and is well worth the examination. It is $9. It's not a cheap pattern, but for the things she could teach me, I'll pay $9. Meanwhile, CFR10, all the info is at a link that goes right below the warm thanks there. It'll take you to the info thread on Ravelry. We are less than 6 months out. Some very good news on that. Jasmine Knitmore messaged me and said that she is happy to do her class again, and I'm really excited about that. And it's unusual for me to ask for a class twice in a row, but Jasmine's really superbly skilled. If she thinks she can teach it twice, I want to hear what she's got to say. I'm just going to say, I mean, she's really got mad skills. But also last year she was talking about ways she could do it better. And I just think it's the most challenging, optimistic type of a class to teach at just a Fiberfest type thing like this. So I'm very excited about that. Please, if you have any ideas for CFR10, let's get them rolling. Let's see if I can generate some kind of schedule for the Saturday. This brings us to what's on my hooks and needles. Nah, I didn't finish anything. So the stash toss remains frozen at 13 skeins in versus 33 out. I did put in a picture, the latest, on the sock yarn cowl, the 5th CFR 23 sock yarn cowl. It's beautiful, and I haven't measured it. It's got to be close to 7 inches right now. You know, it just sits on my desk at work. That is in my study when I work from home. And on the desk, I have all these little tiny balls of leftover sock yarns. And so whatever I have gets into it, which led me to a new thing. I finally am almost done the ones that are on my desk. You know, it's only taken me 5 cowls, right? And so I have a bag. Yes, I have a bag of other minis that have been lying around. And most of them were bigger amounts. And I had thought of them as being, you know, my Franken socks material. But I looked at a bunch and said, you know, I just have the need to get a finished object. So I could just take a few of these bigger ones and whip up some crocheted fingerless mitts. And so I spent yesterday winding all the ones in green. And as I look over to my left, I can see the beginning of one of the crocheted mitts. This is a Lion brand pattern. It's free on their website. It's really, the essential, if I remember correctly, is you do 2 inches of wrist, and you do that in back post crochet. And I believe I chained 34. I think the smaller one is 28, but I use the bigger one because I have big hands. Anyway, you do 2 inches of back post crochet. And then you switch to single crochet and make your way up. You do a little gusset. And then when you get past the gusset, you do more back post double crochet, if I remember correctly. It might be front post at that point. They're fooling around with it. And when you do the thumb, that's all back post crochet, you know, coming out of the gusset. It's a very, very simple pattern. This is not a spiral that you finish a row and you tie it off and you start a new row by turning the project and going back the way you came. That's important to me because I have made this simply as a spiral, going up the hand without doing all the front and back post nonsense. Having done both, I will tell you the Lion brand pattern works better. that actually the things they tell you to do, you get a warmer, thicker, kind of spongier hand on the glove. So I was surprised because I made a lot of these without ever doing the back post or the front post thing, which I was foolishly afraid of for many years for reasons I can't understand. And I have to say that, sorry, it's not back post, front post. I believe it is back loop, front loop. Anyway, read the pattern. It's free. You'll figure it out. But anyway, so I took one of my little minis and I wound it up from the little mini skein. And then I weighed it on my kitchen scale and I separated it into 2 equal balls. And I said, this is what you're getting. You know, this is going to be the base of the glove. It actually is, I think, the leftover of my Cuticle Yarns beautiful deep forest green. Anyway, and so I did one of those just to see what I can see. And it came out very pretty, but it's not in the show notes. When I get a little more to it, I'll enter it into Ravelry and put it in the show notes. Lydia's pink socks. I'm just clawing my way down the first sock, heading for the heel. I have 2 minis of that pink. And I'm very interested to see how far I will get with this one mini before I have to change colors. I'm pretty clear I'm going to make it to the heel very easily. And so it's likely that will go even into the foot. And then actually I may have, did I get to I'm trying to think if I actually got to the waist yarn for the heel. No, I don't think I have yet. Anyway, you know, I'm obviously going to use a different color somewhere on the foot, you know, on the instep. And then I'll probably use something very hard wearing for the heel because I've got a big hunk of leftover Regia. So that's going very nicely. Vestuary 24, I sat down yesterday and devoted myself to finishing the back. And at this point, it's very easy. It's like 21 rows going up the front, and then I do the V neck. And then, of course, you seam the shoulders and do the ribbing on the neck and the ribbing on each armhole. So really, at this point, you're at that place where you just say, day number 1, do those 3 inches. Day number 2, left front. Day number 3, right front. Day number 4, the neck. You know, day number 5, the armholes. You know, these are just little projects now instead of just sitting around all day knitting on it. But it looks quite nice. You can see it there. It really became this kind of stockinette purgatory for me. I got a little tired of it, but I have to tell you, that's just me, because it's Malabrigo Rios in the color Blue Jeans, which really could be called a kind of variegated sapphire. And when I finish this baby, I'm just going to be wearing it with everything. I mean, this is one of the standby colors of my wardrobe, so I'm very, very pleased to finally feel like I'm getting somewhere on that again. The deep Stash Dive 2 socks, you can see I'm well past the heel. That is the waist yarn for the heel. And I'm over halfway up the foot. So, you know, in my guessing game of what will be finished next, I'm betting on this sock, which is good because this is really the one I need to get finished. That the deep Stash Dive 2 socks have been around for a while and need to be done. So meanwhile, Dizzy Blondes, no action there. So let's get on to a strategy. And of course, we're with overthinking. And I'm just going to ask the question that everybody fears. So I want you to sit down in a comfortable chair. Maybe you need a soothing drink. Take a few deep breaths. Here it comes, the question everybody fears. What if you're okay? I know, Dr. Gemma's being facile, you're thinking. Or Dr. Gemma just called everybody a hypochondriac in her audience. No to both of those things. But overthinking is an interesting thing because currently, and very noticeably since the pandemic, we have a lot more overthinking coming out of the closet. That is to say, I suspect most of the people who believe they overthink, and that's a lot of people, it's actually most people, I think. Before the pandemic, we didn't ask ourselves that question because we had so many distractions. We could go out, we could do things. Inadvertently, the pandemic taught a lot of us to stop doing that. It taught a lot of us how to save money. It taught a lot of us to entertain ourselves at home. This did not always work out the way I would want it to. Like, we got a lot more people hooked on video games. Although, That's anecdotal. I don't know if there's been research on that. But a lot more people are telling me they can't get their kids off the video games. It's very easy to attribute it to the fact we all got trapped indoors, at which time to a lot of parents, video games probably looked really helpful. Those of you who cringed, I'm with you. But remember, I'm from an older generation. But, the real thing here is, did we all start overthinking, or did we just notice we're overthinking? That have we been doing it all along? And there's a lot of good to be said for going out and just distracting yourself on your days off and relaxing and going places and doing things. There's a lot of good to that. It's just that we all kind of cut back, and the corporations got a whole lot greedier. I mean, corporate profits have skyrocketed while we have inflation. So it's not really worth doing all those things all of a sudden. So at the end of the day, what if you're actually okay? What if you're just responding to environmental pressures? The reason I care about this is another dangerous thing a lot of us got from the pandemic was the use of Dr. Google, if you see what I mean. So I have a real flood of people coming in and they're diagnosing themselves. And I can't blame them because, in my experience, I have doc-in-a-box healthcare. I've got so-so health insurance. My doctors don't spend any time. They don't do psychoeducation. They're just not good. I mean, I do a lot of their psychoeducation when I talk to their patients because the patients aren't getting any information from their doctor. Often it's here's a pill, go away. This gets worse as you age, that doctors tend to view older people as just nags or complainers or pains in the neck or hopeless because we develop chronic illnesses in our age. So doctors don't like spending time with us. And so, a lot of us are reliant on Dr. Google for information that we used to get from some helpful nurse or from a psychoeducation session with our doctor. So the problem is we're all using Dr. Google. And if you think this isn't going to lead to obsessive thinking, you're an optimist. I mean, to put that in some perspective, in mental health, I get out of graduate school after, doing a doctorate, writing an original dissertation that's a contribution to the research in the profession. In other words, you got to know a lot to do this. This isn't just something you kind of dance through. It's hard to get a doctorate, And after doing that, I still cannot diagnose without being closely supervised by a more experienced licensed professional. And they're not allowed to supervise me unless they take a significant amount of training to do it. So we don't view this lightly. And then when I do that, I've got to do 3,000 hours of this supervision. That comes out to slightly over 2 years full-time if every hour of your full-time is supervised. I mean, this isn't easy to do. And the reason we do that is book learning is not enough. You can't just read Dr. Google. You have to go out there and see it. You have to see the diagnosis. You have to read charts and see what other members of your treatment team, like the psychiatrist, are doing about it. You have to see the meds the person might be taking. You have to get a feel for which meds go where and what it looks like when the meds go wrong and what kind of behaviors are associated with each disorder. So, this is considered by American healthcare at large, psychology, is considered by American healthcare at large as really easy compared to medicine, physical medicine like an MD. I don't know about that. There's a lot of, it's kind of gray for me, but I respect their point of view on this. But it really should tell you, you can't just diagnose yourself with a mental illness or a physical illness in most cases because you simply don't know all the possibilities out there. So that's the risk of Dr. Google. But if your healthcare system is not supporting you or not even-handed, you're going to have to use Dr. Google. So this results in people reading Dr. Google and being frightened and thinking, but that's me. And then they're walking around obsessing about this stuff. And they come into my office and they're actually pretty normal, resilient, healthy people. Now remember, I'm an individual outpatient. That's the level of highest wellness. This isn't inpatient. I don't get that many tremendously sick people, fortunately. And that's why I'm in this, because I did my years in the trenches with the heavier duty stuff. Okay, so a lot of people come into my office and they're overthinking their health care because now they've got a lot more fears than they used to have before the pandemic. They're afraid to be in public. So now if they get sick, anything they get sick from, they think somebody gave them. And that includes, believe it or not, mental health. I wouldn't be depressed if my mother hadn't done X or my friend hadn't done Y. And the answer is, most of the time, people look at me with absolute shock when I describe their situation back to them. I say, here's what I hear you saying. And then I say, I don't lie. I say, actually, you're doing pretty well. I have to hand it to you. You're handling a lot of this very well. You're trying to think about this constructively. Why do I get to say this? Well, first, I'm a dialectical behavioral therapist, and a major premise of DBT is respect for the patient. That is to say, the patient is doing the best they can. You don't treat them like they're an idiot or they should be able to solve this problem. They already have tried before they walk into your office. And you ask them about that. What have you tried? And their solutions just haven't worked. And a lot of their solutions make sense, but it just didn't work. Think about it like painting your living room. You say, I want it to be pink. And you go to the paint store and there's all these pinks. A million ways to get it right. So you pick a nice light pink and you put it on the wall and suddenly you're standing in the middle of the Pepto-Bismol palace. It was too pink. Now, you had a problem? Paint the living room. You had a solution? Paint it pink. You did all the research, went to the paint store, looked at all the paint chips, brought home a paint chip, and now you're standing in the Pepto Palace. That's kind of like mental health, where you tried everything for your problem and nothing worked, even though you feel like it should have. And so most people come in my office and I say, well, here's what you really need to do. I don't say it that way. I say, here's what our experience says works for most people. The political way to say, or the diplomatic way to say, here's what I think you need to do. But you always start with that respect, but you don't have to fake it at this level. At this level, most people coming into your office are very resilient. They're very experienced, and the solutions they tried were good solutions. It just didn't work in their individual situation, and sometimes you can tell why, and sometimes you're just not sure, and so you move on to other things. Now, the important thing here is I'm saying, weirdly, as a solution for overthinking, I'm saying, what if you looked at yourself as okay? And if you start from that place, I can handle this. At my core, I'm okay. But for some reason, I'm having these thoughts. And then you say, what do I do about that? And this takes you around that huge pothole in the highway of life that basically people fall into because they immediately start blaming someone else, or they start blaming themselves, or they decide they're not morally good enough, or they decide they're cracked or crazy, or they're listening to someone who's telling them those things. And the reality is we don't want to fall into that pothole. The reality is if you start looking at yourself and say, I'm fundamentally okay, but I have a solvable problem here, and I'm just not sure how to solve it, then when you do the overthinking, you're going to naturally move to, wait, this is the thing I don't want to do. This is the thing I want to solve. 9 people out of 10 will start working on self-distraction strategies. Where do I come in? Those don't work either. In other words, you simply don't know enough of those strategies to manage overthinking. And so usually I start in DBT, we have the distress tolerance strategies that are meant for this, among other things. They're meant to handle, at this moment, I am distressed, I am upset, what do I do in this moment? Then the longer term strategies come next. The emotional management strategies. And I've gone through these before in the podcast. Okay, so you come into my office and I will go into the acronyms. You remember the acronyms, ACCEPTS and IMPROVE. I'll go through the acronyms. Usually I start with ACCEPTS because that's the most successful for the most people. As I'm doing this, people say to me often, well, I already do that one. Yes, you do. Most people, when I do the acronym, ACCEPTS, A for activity, C for contribute, C for compare, E for emotional management, P for push away, T for thought stopping, S for sensory distraction. When I do this, people will identify they're already doing 2 or 3 of these. So what's the problem? They're not working. So go do the other ones. That if you use one strategy over and over again, after a while, it just probably won't work that well because your brain kind of catches on to this game. So you have to be able to move between the strategies. But at the core of all of what I'm saying here is, when you're doing the overthinking, what if you're okay? What if it's just you have a bad habit? And when you start at that place, that I am fundamentally okay, you look, and by the way, this is the compare strategy in disguise. You look back and you say, I've gotten through worse than this. I got through the time my father died. I got through the time, using my life, I was injured in the prison. I got through all this really heavy stuff. I can get through this. Yeah, that's going back to I am fundamentally okay. And when you do that, you believe in your core that you are a competent person who can manage problems. Hello, self-esteem. Because that's what people do. They come in my office and say, I have no self-esteem. Nah, you just need the skills. You have plenty of self-esteem or you'd be dead right now. Believe me, people with no self-esteem just don't last very long. So, when you're thinking about overthinking and you're overthinking about overthinking, yuck, 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 you start from a place of, what if I'm fundamentally okay? And you think of all the ways in which you've managed yourself successfully. And then you look at, I have this problem, and then it's going to be solvable because you have competence and you have motivation. I've solved this problem before, and I know I can solve it again. That's the C strategy, the compare strategy from the ACCEPTS acronym, from distress tolerance. Hoo-yah. Okay, meanwhile, back at shoot. Oh, today I'm going to 30 minutes. Actually, I think today's my last day at 25 minutes because I do each time for a month. So actually, after I finish today, I'm going to 30 minutes a day. I've done 240 miles since late November on my FitDesk. I particularly like this because when I bought the FitDesk, I did a lot of research on it, and I read all these reviews, and people said, oh yes, I really used this. I did 50 miles last year. Child's play, she said, flashing her eyebrows up and down maniacally. It's been really great, and it's really worked with my plan that I'll talk about in the blather about weight loss and bringing down my sugar. It's been absolutely a wonderful, wonderful add-on to that system. In the fluffy books, not doing Alexander the Great. No, I'm just staying away from television because I'm just tired of staring at screens all day. I did listen to a thing called Vikings, and this was in the free stuff that Audible gives you every month if you have a subscription. And they call them Audible exclusives or something like that. And some of them are okay, some of them are just a waste of your time. I'm not really sure how Audible decides to make these free, if they're trying to get you hooked on a series or something. This was another variation on the docudrama. It was just plain weird. They would tell you the history of the Vikings, but they would interleave that with these actors and performers trying to be funny, making weird jokes about what they just told you about the Vikings, or imitating them, or having them sing folk songs. Think Mystery Science Theater 3000, but they're doing it to somebody reading a history. Now, the interesting thing is, I really wanted to know about Viking history because when I was going through school, and we didn't do as much Western European history as I would later do at university, but even so, even when I was doing it at university, when you're looking at the history of Western Europe, the Vikings are enormous in the history of Northern Europe, and even as far down, they get They owned Paris for quite a while, and I really kept thinking there's a big gap in my knowledge of how all this comes about. And so I really enjoyed Vikings, but man, every time they started doing one of their silly drama stuff, I was grinding my teeth saying, God, just get on to the next thing. But it was very fun and very interesting. I just regret the stupid stuff. And apparently, this is the way people think we have to teach history now. Sure, why not? But it was interesting. The most valuable part, at the end, the author recommends 2 books. I know one of them is very famous, Children of Ash and Elm, and I can't remember the other one. He points out that Children of Ash and Elm, I think that's the one, takes 240 pages before they actually talk about the Viking raid, that they're trying to give you background, culture, and history. This would have been worth it for just that. I think it was about 4 hours long. Meanwhile, I am interested in Granny Squares, and so I went roaming around on Amazon looking at the Granny Square books. And I bought one that was $7 spiral bound, which you can pretty much tell what the value of that's going to be right there. I suspect this was written by an AI bot in China. However, they give you some very basic fundamental squares in it. And to tell you the truth, the real value of this is the image by image, step by step teaching of how to do crochet if you don't know how to crochet. I think that's really what this is worth. That if you told me for $7 I could learn to crochet from this book, I'd be thrilled. Now I already know how to crochet. How? I paid $20 to learn to crochet from a book because I'm one of these people, I can't watch you do it. I have to have frame by frame photos to do it. And that's how I learned to knit. After everybody and their cousin tried to teach me, that's how I learned to crochet. So if you have somebody who wants to learn to crochet, this is actually a really good book for that. The Granny Squares are humble and unimaginative. You look at them and you go, I don't think I want to make a sweater out of those. They're not really spectacular, but there are some pretty fundamental basic squares. And you can see a few of them on the cover. So, I would say, sure. Oh, by the way, the other funny thing is, with every square, after they show you the square, they teach you how to crochet every stitch you need in that square all over again, even though it's at the front of the book. So, yeah, it's true. There was a moment where I thought this could be subtitled, Crochet Granny Squares If You're Paralyzed with Fear or just simply not that savvy about how to use pictures to do something. Okay, but this is a basic book. And it has its uses. Good news, I'm probably going to scan it. I'm thinking about scanning it, taking it apart, punching holes in it, and putting it in a 3-ring binder. And I think I'm going to collect a bunch of these and do that. And I'll probably give the binder away at CFR, so someone else can have this big guide to Granny Squares while I just scan all the pages. Yeah, it's true. But, I'd give my book away anyway. I might as well get the scan of it first. Something I really like, well, you can tell my theme right now is losing weight and bringing down my blood sugar. And it's working, and I'll get to that. But something I really like, liquid stevia. Okay, stevia is a plant. It is naturally sweeter than sugar. Usually they grind it up, they mix it with some other more neutral, probably starches, unfortunately. And you see it in powdered form a lot. However, somebody finally introduced me to this concept, liquid stevia. And so this is organic, and I have to assume it's probably suspended in an alcohol. And yeah, alcohol, sugar, all fermentation occurs in the presence of sugar. Get it through your head. However, when I make a pint of my electrolyte drink, in a pint, 5 to 6 drops of this stuff. So in a cup of tea, if I use it, I haven't been using it with my teas, but if I were to use it, 2 drops. What does that mean? Well, 8 ounces is $20, but you're using this thing 2 drops at a time. And the spout, when you open it, is really adapted to that. because stevia is sweeter than sugar. You can't possibly do it as a one-to-one exchange. When you do it in large amounts, stevia tastes bitter. So I have to tell you, I'll probably be using my current bottle of it for months. And it seems like a good deal to me. It's certainly cheaper than sugar when you look at it this way. But this lets you get away from all the phony sweeteners. So, we like Jordan Skinny syrups, but again, it's probably got Splenda in it. It's got some of the phony sweeteners. I'm trying to even get away from Swerve as much as I can, although I'll explain what that means as we go along. So put a lid on it is highly influenced by this. I decided while I was losing weight, I also wanted to walk away from dairy, at least during the week. But I started craving hot cocoa. Now, normally, to me, this may vary with people, to me this means I'm missing magnesium. And so when I crave hot cocoa, I drink hot cocoa. All right, hot cocoa without guilt, half a teaspoon of cocoa powder, and I'm going to put this in the small mixing cup on my bullet blender, just so you know. 4 drops, that's a little much, really 3 drops of liquid stevia. And then I put in a lot of pumpkin pie spice, a lot. Oh my gosh, well, all right, maybe 1/8 of a teaspoon, but put it in to taste. Pumpkin pie spice, not going to hurt you. This is a pre-mixed pumpkin pie spice. So you can sort of guess, there's no sugar in it, but there's going to be cinnamon, there's going to be a touch of cumin, a little bit of turmeric. Well, you get what I mean. What I'm telling you is you can just go to a recipe for pumpkin pie, look up the spices right there, and find the proportions. You can make this up in advance. I had a pre-bottled bottle of it from Penzeys Spices. All right. So I put it all into a blender cup, and then I use the Keurig to put in the water. I'm putting in about 16 ounces, I suspect. And then I go to the bullet blender, and I blend it up. And I blend it till it froths, which it will. Sooner or later, you get enough air in it. This is magnificent. Now, if you really want to go the extra mile, I mean like 2 grains of cayenne pepper, just something to kind of wake you up, or a little bit of hot paprika, or mellow paprika. Any of those would add to it. But I have to tell you, this makes fantastic hot cocoa, and there's just no guilt that all of these are just good herbs and spices and ingredients. And yeah, notice the liquid stevia. I can't believe I put 4 drops in this. That's way too sweet. It would have to be at least 3. And that tells you 1 drop, how much of a difference that makes. Okay, on to the blather. Well, we have a beautiful rainy weekend in Southern California, and this leads to the old joke, please check on your Southern California friends. It's raining. We're not okay. But of course, this leads to cleaning and crafting, and that's what I've been doing. So, again, the digital cleaning, that is going along so well, but I am amazed how it has been like 2 months now, and it just is never ending. So I have yet again another box discovered in the garage of old files from my days as a qualified medical evaluator. And so I've got this huge heap next to the shredder, 15 minutes a day. That comes out to about 3 full bins of shredded paper. And we're going. We're just cooking at it. It's been amazing, though, just getting rid of this. The garage looks much different. And, of course, that's Project G. And Project G is very much on the rails again. And I had a good talk with the beloved, and he went out there today and just said, wow. And one of the things I said was, we don't want our son to have to do this someday without us. And he really can hear that. And he went out, and apparently he got rid of a bunch of boxes. So that was very, very impressive. I'm still piling up my stuff. I didn't know I had that much stuff in the garage. And so we're getting rid of that, and that's led to interesting discoveries like a nest of mice living in a box of old household fabrics, which is good. They can all go anyway. And that's just going in the trash. I'm not putting that in my car. Because there's mice things in there. But, it's been really great. And again, I found all these 3-ring binders, and I'm thinking, really good use for that would be to scan in all my pattern books and just put them instead in those binders and give them away. Because I don't want them, but I do want the patterns. But that is what my PDF pad, my Remarkable, and the app on my Apple tablets are for, so that I can look those things up and just use them. And I can mark them up any way I want with notes without affecting the original patterns. So this has been pretty amazing. And so meanwhile, I'm doing the weight loss thing. Okay, I'm down 15 pounds in 3 weeks. And before any of you go crazy, because I know some of you are going to say, oh, you're losing weight too fast. No, I'm not. That's far less than a pound a day. And the other thing is going to be, yes, but are you going to be able to maintain that? That I don't know. But when you do this kind of hard driving weight loss, one of the great things is you come face to face with all your fantasies about food. Oh boy, and I did this before 6 years ago when I lost all the weight when I first got diagnosed with diabetes. And it was a hard thing. And so the fantasies that are back, food is a reward. No, I have plenty of other rewards. Food doesn't have to be the reward. The most successful reward is drinking tea and exercising. And that's what this whole thing with the tea tastings has been about, trying to drill that into myself, to form that habit of drinking special tea instead of eating special foods. And now I've been doing it without sweeteners and without dairy. And the surprise is it works great. There are exceptions. I think I will get to it while I'm talking here. We'll see if I remember this 5 minutes from now. But it has been extraordinary that my herbal teas taste fabulous. My black teas, I am a dedicated Earl Grey drinker. It doesn't taste right to me without the sweetener. It's actually okay without the cream. But now I'm using stevia in this very limited way, which is nice. I really want to get away. Now, there's nothing wrong that I know of with Swerve, but that's another one of my food problems is I want things sweet. Now, I remember I didn't used to be this way. I remember telling people when I was younger, I don't like sweets. I prefer savory. And I think that's probably what my body, my genotype, is oriented to. And I've kind of overwhelmed it over the years. So there's nothing wrong with a little bit of, Splenda here and there, I suppose. I don't want to endorse it. There's certainly nothing wrong as far as I can tell with allulose, with Swerve. But there's a bigger problem there for me. I'm a carb addict, remember? And so the problem is I can't always be on sweet. And the drop-by-drop stevia is working really, really well. The other fantasy, and I know some of you who know me are going to nod at this point and tell yourself that you politely won't mention it to me when you see me next, and I'd like to thank you for that, and you know who you are. Portions. Because I did not realize how big my portions were. Now, they used to be huge when I was a carb eater, and they are significantly smaller as a keto eater. And you know what? They're still too big. And that's probably what's done a lot of this damage. My weight gain has been very gradual over the last 3 years, and I think this is probably at the base of it. All right, so what am I doing? Well, I didn't mean to do this, but it worked out this way, and I kind of am loving it. I'm eating 1 meal a day. Now, that's not fully true. During the day, I drink homemade bone broth from organic chicken, and I drink my Ketorade for the electrolytes. I have to tell you, I don't even notice eating during the day. Like, I'm not hungry. I don't notice that I'm not eating anything more substantial. And yes, this is the basic fast that Jason Fung, MD, recommends. People say, well, you're not really fasting if you're drinking bone broth. Yeah, I am. Try it. See what it's like. The thing is, though, you have to remember I'm not a carb eater in the way most of you are. When you are a carb eater, fasting like this is really hard. When you're not a carb eater or you don't eat many carbs, this is not actually a big deal. So there's no sense of loss here. And then at night, I eat dinner. But the interesting thing is my stomach volume shrank radically in the first week. It was noticeable after like about 4 days. Now, somewhere in those 5 days of the working week, I try to do a 48-hour fast. That's because the boys aren't home for 2 nights a week. They're out doing track and also calculus class at the local community college with my son, my husband and my son. So, I can, after work, make a meal, but do I really feel like making a meal? And the answer is usually no. And the bone broth and the electrolytes really keep me perfectly satisfied. So, there's one 48-hour fast, and then there's a bunch of 24-hour fasts. And so that's 5 days. And then on the weekend, I do eat, because you don't want your body to stay in that fasting pattern, because what's going to happen is your metabolism will slow down because it thinks you need to slow down. It thinks you're not able to get food, and so it starts conserving energy. So on the weekends, I go out, I get a lot of exercise, and I eat. However, remember that thing about the small portions, not eating that much. So suddenly, every restaurant meal for me, and those are things like poke bowls with no rice with green salad, it's not one meal, it's 2 meals, sometimes it's 3 meals. We go to Mexican together as a family on Friday night, local place, they all know us. And I get this big salad. It's a chicken salad, grilled chicken on top, strips of grilled chicken, and this huge salad with blue cheese dressing. Yeah, that's 3 meals now. It's really astonishing. So I'm getting a lot more bang for my buck at restaurants, kids. The other thing here is this is not me holding back. This is, if I eat too much protein or fat, I hurt after the meal for like 2 hours. The other thing I learned, food fantasy, I don't have a stop button. I thought I did, I really don't. So fortunately, my husband's kind of getting the hang of how much I can eat. So sometimes he looks at me and says, you probably want to think about stopping. And he's right. And so really what I'm doing is relearning a good portion size for me. Interesting side note, green salad, it seems to be an exception. So far, when I eat a huge amount of green salad, I don't fill up. I don't notice it. So green salad is this kind of strange exception for me. So that's what we're doing. And how far will I go with this? Let me tell you what a shock it was. Week 1, I only did 4 days of week 1, lost 4 pounds. Week 2, only lost 3 pounds, was very scared and upset. Week 3, lost 8 pounds. So what I want you to know is, your mileage can really vary. Do not weigh yourself every day. A lot of the diets I've been looking into while I've been doing this journey have been saying only weigh yourself once a month. I don't know, but let me tell you the rewards. I feel better. I have more energy. I look better. I look in the mirror and I can see the 15 pounds are gone. No more love handles, no more belly. All my sweaters have turned into tunics, which is a bit of a shock. All of my clothes are loose or fit excellently, depending on when I bought them. No more diabetic symptoms, no more numbness, no more tingling, no more problems with sleep. And yes, I have been working on my sleep program. I'm about to graduate. I was going to bed at 11:45. In another 3 days, I go to bed at 11:30. How does that work, Gemma? I've now been going to bed mostly at about 10:30 to 11. That once you tell your body what you're trying to achieve, it will support you in it. So, I plan to keep going with this month by month, just reducing. Only once in the last 2 weeks did I stay up to 11:45. A couple of times I went to bed at like 10:30 and was still awake at about 11 or 11:30. It's not smooth sailing. I'm really changing a big dynamic habit here, but it's been very, very worth doing it. So that's what we've been doing. It's pretty complex. Thank you for listening. Let's see what else. Haven't done anything on the walkway because of the pouring rain. We still have a few more posts to whack into the ground, and I still have a few more lights that I'm thinking about. Solar lights, where do I want them to go? The doggies. The doggies are doing fine. The boys are both on spring break this week. So the beloved's going to take Captain off to the vet, which is great. And we have the usual list in the show notes of the community resources. That is the books I use for patterns. This does not include a lot of the individual patterns. You can find them in my Ravelry projects. My favorite resources that I buy in support of my knitting. And then a list of links to skills and techniques. Please feel free to go into any of these and add your own contributions. I'd really like this to be a sort of community library. On the calendar, okay, not much is changing. Yarnopoly and Second Saturday Stitches, they're both to be found on Facebook. You can also look up the events at the local libraries in your area. In our area, that will take you to our Sit and Stitch group, which usually meets the second and fourth Saturday of the month at the Canyon Country Library. The SCV Free Craft Exchange, another group you can find on Facebook, they're kind of stalled. The weather has been a problem. And they're talking about, can other people take this over every so often? I'm actually thinking of taking it over. We can't do it at our place because we're not in the SCV. I just work there. But I actually have been getting tips. So you may hear about that in months to come. I say this because I think you should be doing things like this in your region. Having a free craft exchange is just good for everybody. And a lot of things pop up like business supplies. Nobody cares much. I do remember in the good old days, the Knitmore ladies, they had a really terrific yarn shop. And they did free yarn swaps every so often. And this is that same spirit. If you haven't got one of these free craft exchange, please do a little homework. Find out where you can do it without bothering anybody. We use local community parks. And as long as we're not selling anything, we're allowed to do that. So you might want to look into it. CFR 10, once again, that will be at the Courtyard by Marriott in Valencia on September 28th, 2024. I suspect, since it's in September, that I will start the sign-ups for the usual characters in July, people who've attended before. And that means if you've attended any of the previous 9. And then the noobs will get to sign on probably in August. Romuel, of course, right now, technically it's December 21st to January 21st this coming year. But for me, I'll probably be working the 30th and the 31st. We will see. Minerva gets the last word. She is adorably just resting in the pile of clean sheets right out of the dryer, because on Saturdays we strip all the beds and wash and dry everything, and then my beloved son makes the bed. And of course, this is cat paradise. So Minerva would like you to know that she loves chilly, rainy days off because she just lounges around and stays cozy in bed, and she thinks you should too. And on that happy note, everybody remember, we are a community. When we support the community, we support ourselves. So please take care of your community by taking care of yourself and vice versa. And that means, everybody, please stay safe, take care of each other, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye. So we have come to the end of another episode of Cognitive. Please do not use this podcast to diagnose yourself. If you think you are having a mental health problem, please contact a licensed mental health professional. Show notes for these episodes can be found at cognitivepodcast, all one word, .blogspot.com. Episodes can be found at iTunes under the name Cognitive Podcast, but also can be found posted next to the show notes on the Blogspot page. Thank you so much for listening. Everybody, stay safe, take care of each other, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.